What's up, everyone? It's BRAP. I'm back. Well, we're back, I should say. Look, want to do a quick BRAP rant because I just feel like there's a lot to talk about this week. There's just a lot of stories that are breaking, a lot of additional insight into the Activision acquisition by Microsoft, and then the Halo stuff that we're gonna rant about. I did want to, we'll probably cover this a little bit on Wednesday too, because I want to get Slow-Mo's thoughts on this, which I had the pleasure of hanging out with him and Gaming Forte on their podcast, DPS podcast, this past Thursday with Agent Deli. We talked about Halo, but so we're going to talk about Halo, and joining me tonight, I have Game Logic. I won't refer to him by his name on screen, but we got Game Logic back in the house with us. What's up, Game Logic?
Nothing much, man. At some point, you're going to have to honor the brand.
I might have to at some point, I suppose,
the disenfranchising of myself.
Right? Oh, my goodness. That is too funny. But, yeah, so I don't know if you had a chance, Game Logic, to read that article that came out recently about, what Phil Spencer said. There's an article by who was it here? Hold on a sec here. I got to go back to the article now. The Verge. So Phil Spencer, who's the Xbox CEO of Xbox, I think that's his official title, or Microsoft Gaming CEO and Xbox Chief, Phil Spencer. That Microsoft Gaming CEO and Xbox Chief. That's Phil Spencer's, I guess, title, whatever. But anyhow, so according to this article, Microsoft will keep Call of Duty on PlayStation for several more years beyond its existing deals. Now, we know that there's a lot of back and forth with the regulatory process here, with the kind of looking into this deal. We talked about the CMA this past week, and we know Phil Spencer said, hey, this game's going to be on the platform, or it's going to be on the PlayStation still. Like, we're not going to take it away. But according to this article, in January of this year, right shortly after this deal was announced, Phil Spencer wrote a letter to Jim Ryan saying Call of Duty would still be available on PlayStation several more years beyond the current Sony contract that's in place. So I think this is kind of interesting because I guess my question is, what's several more years? Is that like at a point where Microsoft makes enough reoccurring revenue off Game Pass that they could just pull it from Sony because they're not going to really miss the additional revenue per se? But I find that hard. I find that hard for Microsoft to just walk away. And again, just in my opinion, I just don't see a company leaving money on the table, especially if it's a lot of money. I could be wrong. Microsoft could be like, no, we bought this. We want this to be ours. We want this to be identified with our brand, Game Pass. And if you want to play it, you're going to have to subscribe to Game Pass. That it's going to be a big driver potentially for them to get more subs. So that's kind of what just happened, or an article that just came out yesterday. And so any thoughts on this, Game Logic? I don't have a chance to read this article. I briefly glanced over. I didn't have time to read over. I just the part that really just caught my eye was the letter to Jim Ryan saying that the Call of Duty would be on PlayStation for several more years.
I briefly went over it. Of course, I did not read the Verge article because I don't think that their Xbox coverage is really accurate. So I read the article over on GameIndustry.biz, and then of course read the precursor to that, which was the blog post that Phil Spencer put up. I guess as we entered this weekend, I think that was Thursday, maybe. So it presents an interesting outlook, and one of the things that I've said is, there's I guess the most relevant thing that I've said to this ongoing, kind of bit of a change. It's not really a change, is that there's a lot of the dialogue around the M&A of Activision and the discussion of Call of Duty in general, as far as what happens after the M&A. And I've cautioned that, a lot of the dialogue is around the assumption that the Call of Duty model is going to remain the same, either in its business model, or in its development model or its release model. None of those necessarily need be the case. We could see, and if you go back a little bit further than that, there was the messaging by Activision themselves before we even heard about the M&A, that this notion of annual releases was something that was under consideration and wasn't necessarily going to continue, that there was going to be a movement to, we kind of already have the nom de guerre of the games as a service, live service games, living games, but there was mention that this was going to tilt much more so in the ongoing release or continuous release model, and what that kind of resonated to me with was that we were going to see a reduction, or at least maybe a going away of the annual releases, and much more so of a continuous delivery model where you were just going to subscribe to Call of Duty, and then you were just going to continuously get periodic updates to the content. And so, kind of in the way that people mistakenly believed that Windows 10 was going, when journalists kind of quoted this. Microsoft is saying this was going to be the last version of Windows ever, which Microsoft actually never said. That was actually something that the media created. But this would be a model that actually reflected that, where you wouldn't see necessarily new versions of Call of Duty, but you would simply subscribe to it as a service, and you would get periodic installations of new content. And so maybe that would look like something that was a little more akin to kind of the Destiny 2 model. But not necessarily the Big Bang Theory kind of annual releases. So all of this is, hints at a possibility that as we get further down the road, that the release model and the business model of Call of Duty could change. If that happens after whatever agreements are in place with Sony, that could be 99 different things. Some of which could mean that change may not present a competitive threat to Sony, or it could be a competitive threat that we're kind of veiled. So there's kind of no telling, what could happen down the road. I think what this hints at is that, Spencer is saying that, that current model, and I think one other thing that's been said that's been very important is, both in the blog post and in what Brad Smith has said, and in other comments, right? One of the things that I'd mentioned that could happen with the absorption of Activision is that, provided Microsoft didn't receive any direction or guidance from any regulatory commission, that caused the Call of Duty model to be constrained in how much they could change it, that Microsoft could follow a tactic of somehow making the version that's available on PlayStation somehow less than, right? That it might not have, all of the capabilities or full features of the Xbox version, or that in similar ways to the way Sony does it now with their agreement with Activision, right, where there are sometimes modes, skins, other types of content that are available on the PlayStation platform that aren't available on the Xbox platform for a year, that they could try and flip that, right, and evolve that over time to looking in the opposite direction. So I think one thing I've keyed on that has been said over the last few days is that it will be the exact same version on PlayStation, right, as it is on Xbox. That leaves a thin veneer of some deltas that could happen, but by and large, what they're commenting on, that they're committing to, is that there will be relative version parity in the versions that go to Xbox and PlayStation.
Yeah, I mean that's that's gonna that to me that when they said that they're gonna get the same, they being PlayStation are gonna get the same version, that made me think like that means that does that mean that they can't, or that maybe the Xbox version might get a special like launch bonus if you get it through Game Pass? Are they gonna be able to do something like that?
I feel like it's like what I was saying was I think there will be minor deltas that they could do, but they will establish some type of subjective, as it always is, threshold, right, where there's not a huge argument that the version on Xbox is some radically different version than the one on PlayStation. And I think they've been messaging that, right, to assuage regulators, right, of that concern, as well as, right, this is part of the spool up and the ramp up. Again, Microsoft has for a long amount of time been people who are really good at this kind of rolling thunder campaign of influence, both in marketing and in messaging things to various regulatory agencies. I think this is part of the build up to September 8th, right, which is their suspense date for when they have to have additional evidence and any type of modification of the deal structure in terms of an undertaking, right, to present to the CMA.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting. We'll learn more September 8th, I would imagine. With what's going to happen, that's in 5 days. What how this is going to play out, but this is interesting. Like I said, I'm kind of fascinated by how this thing's going to play out. It's interesting to get some insight into what Phil did back in January, and reaching out to Jim Ryan and kind of reassuring him that, hey, you know what, you don't have to worry about COD. That's at least it's going to be on your platform for the next couple of years. So we'll see. We'll see how this pans out. So I want to talk about Halo. Oh man. So for those who don't know, I was an Xbox Live beta tester. I bought an OG Xbox for Halo. That's the reason why I bought the original Xbox. I wanted to play Halo. I think when I used to, yes, Josh says you don't say BRAP. I used to hang out the GameSpot forums before there was Twitter, gaming Twitter.
And hey, I just want to inject one thing here, which is relatively breaking news to me. I need to corroborate this, but all this hubbub that's been going on about Microsoft this week, their stock is down 4.5%. So it seems that investors are taking it to heart that this is an adversity and a challenge to Microsoft. So just wanted to.
Okay. Out. Yeah. No. Thank you for that. So check out the GameSpot forums. The GameSpot reviewed the Halo game. I think they gave it a 10. And the game just reviewed well across the board. Like it was the killer app that Microsoft needed to launch this console, and they nailed it with Halo. Halo was just Halo's been an iconic franchise. It put Microsoft, Xbox in particular, on the map. It became a phenomenon. I remember some of the launch footage. I remember when Halo 2 launched, how big that was. I remember standing in line. There was just, oh my God, there's so many people for that launch at the my local GameStop at the time, and it was it was an event. Like literally, when Halo would release, it was literally an event. And if you would have told me 20 years ago that Halo Infinite, that a Halo game would have challenges, would be missing features, would have been delayed. If you would have told me that fans were calling for the firing of the studio that made the game, which I've seen actually on Twitter, there's actually a hashtag fire 343 going around right now. But if you would have told me that fans don't trust 343i anymore, even I even read an article. Ars Technica said I had a headline stating something like I changed my review of Halo Infinite. If you'd have told me those things 20 years ago, I would have been like, "You're crazy. This is Halo. This would never happen." Nobody would have anticipated that Bungie would have left. And even when 343i took over, Halo 4, I didn't think was a bad game. It was good. But what we noticed was that they either got the campaign, nailed the campaign, or the and they didn't get the multiplayer, or they nailed the multiplayer but didn't get the campaign down. That's been kind of the feeling amongst the Halo community that they haven't made the complete Halo yet. 343i hasn't, compared to what Bungie's done previously. And here we are with Halo Infinite. The season 3 is being pushed back to March, so we're gonna have a season 2 that's going to last. It's going to be about almost a year. We're gonna go almost a year between seasons for live service game. Season 3 will add additional 2 maps. Split screen co-op, which has been a staple of Halo, is not happening. They are going to release the. They're still going to do the online campaign co-op. That's going to, I think, arrive November 8th of this year with Forge. I'm excited about Forge. I think it's, I'm really curious to see what the community is going to do with that. I've seen some cool things, some leaks. But for a live service game, I mean, content's king, and they just don't. They're just not cranking out the content. And one of the things I've noticed this weekend, Logic, is that there's been quite a few individuals at 343i that have announced their resignation. Some are going to EA. But I'm starting to see people leave, and I don't know if that's a sign that maybe things are changing drastically in terms of staff there. And I mean, I've heard rumors that Staten wants to bring his his people in. He brought back, I think, one of the I forget the guy's name, but he had worked with Staten on Halo Reach and Halo 3 as well, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I'm pretty confident that he did reach with them. He did. David Faulkner saying give Halo to id Studios. I've seen that mentioned quite a bit on the Twitters, but yeah, I just Logic, for me, it's just as and look, I'm a big Halo fan. Halo just there's very few games that just for me over the last 40 years, there's only a handful of games that have just like wowed me, and they're so iconic that when you hear the Halo music kick in with the monks chanting and the guitar riff, and very few games do that, have done that for me, where I'm just like, I get goosebumps. Halo being one of them, Metal Gear Solid, Mario, Zelda, The Last of Us Part 1, more so than The Last of Us Part 2. I mean, there's just very few of those franchises that just kind of give me goosebumps like that. And to see Halo kind of struggling, and then, it's supposed to be a launch game, and they almost launched it with the launch of the Xbox Series X. Remember, Master Chief's picture was in the back of that box. And the game ended up getting delayed a year. But it just seems like it's just been an uphill battle for 343i to get this game content and up and running. So I don't know if Halo is dead. I've seen some people say that. I'm not. I think in the day and age of live service games, we have some examples of games that maybe didn't launch well that have kind of turned the ship. You look at No Man's Sky. You look at Sea of Thieves. That's not what I would want for Halo. But the way it stands, I just like, it's disappointing that we're going to have to wait, till March of next year to get more new maps, to get a new season. And I wonder if it's too little too late for this franchise to turn things around. So and it's look, and I said this on Crossfire the other night, like the in-game mechanics are just great. I mean, I think you would agree, Game Logic. You and I have played quite a bit of multiplayer together, and the mechanics are just great. It's just lacking content, really. I also think it's I've said this. I said this too. On DPS. I think this game would do well to add a battle royale mode. And I've heard rumors that something like that is in the works. But I don't know, man. How do we get here, Game Logic? And I something to me just doesn't. Again, I'm not claiming to have ever developed a game like some other podcasts, which lead you to believe. But as a fan of the series, as a gamer, it just something just doesn't seem right. Like I'm like, this is your baby, this is your flagship title, your most important title, I think, to the brand. Thank you, Jacob. How did this happen? Like, just something just doesn't like. Something just seems off to me. Like, who let this happen? So anyhow, what are your thoughts, Logic?
Yeah, it's tough for me to really comment from the same perspective that I think a lot of gamers view it through, because I'm not as tightly coupled to individual franchises. I've never been like a big mascot like fan, on any platforms. I think overall, at the end of the day, that's how I approach. That's how I approach gaming. That it's much more so from the platform perspective than the individual title perspective. So for me, the most relevant thing is kind of how it leaves this game kind of winding up on the multiplayer landscape. In the PvP landscape. And as I talked about, I don't know, a couple episodes ago, or maybe a rant, nothing that came out, last year was really great, right, from a PvP multiplayer perspective. Battlefield 2042 was, Battlefield was on an off year. Call of Duty was on an off year. And so in that space, I guess, I continue to play Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. I think what I guess what I'm looking most forward to, just see if it lives up to its potential, is Modern Warfare 2. I had a lot of fun with Modern Warfare, but I hadn't really gotten the PvP itch when that game initially launched, until really it was kind of at the tail end of its 1 year life cycle before Black Ops Cold War launched. So then from the Microsoft perspective, I've said many times before, there's a question to me on how the production pipeline is being managed. There's an array of 23 studios. And it's to me, there's not output commensurate with the number of resources that are aligned there, and aligned directly under Phil. That being said, right, the past 2 years has been what it is. Like, there's no going back in time and changing that. And the calculations that I've run shows that I don't know that all 23 of those studios will be cranking out games at a level that I think of as being commensurate with the pipeline for a couple of years. So where does that leave a Halo Infinite? Where does that leave a Halo fan? I don't really know, right? I mean, the two questions are, where does it leave a Halo fan?
It leaves us waiting.
Well, right. Yeah. I mean, it leaves you,
and we go elsewhere.
Well, right, and that's what people hate to hear me say, right? You go pursue other options in PvP land if that's your focus. It was really interesting. I actually went back to the rant last week and listened to the rest of it after I had to drop off. I really appreciated a lot of the view of Worrywart. Don't have a similar perspective as him, because, like I said, I'm not as tightly coupled from a heartfelt or emotional state to these individual franchises, but I definitely could understand his perspective and where he was coming from. So if you've fallen out of love with Halo, then where do you go? And the truth of the matter is, I mean, I guess that's a curious question to ask. Like, where do you go for a deeply lore-driven, first person shooter, story, narrative, cinematic, right type of content? And right now, I don't know where you go. I guess Destiny 2, because you can play that right as a single player, and you can play that from a story perspective. But other than that, I don't really know where you go, because there isn't a lot of that on Xbox or PlayStation. I mean, I would certainly be open to other ideas. I'm sure I'm probably forgetting of a title here and there.
I mean, I can't think of anything that's like sci-fi, first-person shooter in space. Like Halo's kind of it, I think. I mean, it could be. I'm just not aware of it. But if I'm thinking like big AAA games, yeah, I mean, you could go to Destiny, but I mean, I don't know. I mean,
I mean, you're coming in the middle of a dance and you're trying to catch up on a lot of lore, right? So
I was gonna say there's that. You're kind of walking into, if you're new to it, you're playing catch up.
Yeah, I mean, Bungie's, in my opinion, has definitely done a great job at coming up with new ways to onboard people. You have to read and catch on to the conventional wisdom that don't get into Destiny 2 now and try and backtrack, right? Just come in the middle of a dance and pick right up with the new onboarding pathway, which I guess is through Beyond Light, and catch up right to where they are now. And for some people will see that as as not as much meat on the bone, right? In terms of just feeling like they haven't latched onto the entirety of the story. So I guess that's a thing. But you and I often talk about, other options that there are on the market. And I don't know that there's a ton out there. I've been spending a lot of my time recently going back and playing a lot of backlog games or revisiting games that are kind of that ilk. I'm going back and playing a lot of the Crisis series, on Xbox or Nintendo Switch. So, as we loft that question, I just don't know, what alternatives to recommend to people.
Yeah, and I don't have much confidence. I mean, it's great that Staten's there, but I don't know. I don't have much confidence that they might be able to turn this thing around. I hope I'm wrong. But just based on what I've seen so far from the current track record, and the delays in content, now here we're supposed to get season 3, and now it's delayed again, till March of 2023, and I'm just like, well, like what's going, like, why are these, like, I want to know why the delay's happening, and to me, 2 maps, like I feel like this game needs more than 2 maps. Or 2 maps a season. Like, to me, that's just not enough, in my opinion. It's not enough. Like, and sometimes the maps, like, you drop those maps, are not even maps you want to play. Like,
let me ask you, because of course, when you and I have talked about Halo, I've come at it. I've mentioned the fact that I'm just not like a legacy Halo player. I just never spent any time with the multiplayer until Halo Infinite. But I talked to you also about my early experiences with Halo, and one of the reasons I never stayed on to it, because to me, I've never thought of it as like a big map oriented game, in terms of like with Call of Duty, you get, even if they're like rechurned maps, right, from a legacy edition that has been updated, right, and redeployed for the new mainline, right. However you characterize that and classify, right, it's still a new map, right? At the end of the day, it's still an expansion of the number of maps that are in rotation. Has Halo ever had a legacy of a lot of maps? And I mean maps from the core development team, not talking about Forge. Because what always turned me off to Halo was, as I mentioned, right, whenever I would get picked up to play in like a Friday night Halo thing or whatever, nobody wanted to play like the core maps. They always wanted to play kind of the goofy modes that had come out of Forge. And I was like, I don't want to play some new mode that I've been introduced to, and have all of 5 minutes to get familiar with what the hell's going on, right? If I'm going to play, I want to play like the core of the content, not, all these other made up things. So has there ever been a history of a lot of maps going into Halo?
So yeah, I mean, like, you had, like, you remember the first Halo, you had a bunch of maps that were like, Hang 'em High, Blood Gulch, and I forget all the maps, but I mean, there was definitely kind of like very similar to what you have now, right? Like, you have all these maps. My issue though is that as they're releasing new maps, some of the maps are like maps I don't care for now. Which is okay, because there's maps that are, and this is where Forge kind of comes into play too, because sometimes you'll have maps that come out of Forge that actually end up becoming pretty popular. But yeah, I mean, they've all had like maps, again, very similar to what you see in Infinite. The problem though is, or the difference is, at some point, you would play Halo, you would probably play a couple, and this is when I was playing a lot, like competitively. We would play 2 or 3 maps, because those are the maps that we would, play other clans in. They were popular amongst the different Halo clans, and so, we would just focus on those couple maps. Now though, for me, I don't play competitively like that. I want to play a variety of different maps. When season 2 launched, they gave us that one map that's kind of like the mini battle royale map, which I don't care for. They also gave us what was the other map they gave us? I forget what it is.
Was that when they brought Breach or Catalyst back or whatever?
I don't remember, man. I don't remember. I'm getting old.
But in general, I agree with you. Like having the number of, I mean, and this is the problem I struggle with Halo in general, right? So there are some number of maps, but you always run into these constraints that don't meet, to pick up on what Worrywart was laying down last week, that don't always meet my personal needs as a gamer, where a lot of those maps are only available in certain modes. And so that's always a thing, right? And so,
well, I was going to say that. And the other thing too is, even if the maps aren't good and I don't like them, at least let me filter out those maps so I don't have to play them. Like, I can't do that. Remember, that was my biggest complaint. Like, if we could do, what was it, Bazaar, and I could filter out the one with the rocket ship or whatever.
Yeah, launch pad or whatever.
Yeah. There's like 3 maps that I would be okay just playing on rotation over and over again. One of them is Bazaar. The other one is the what map is that? The one with what is it? It's like where some people camp the top area of the map. Shit.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Catalyst.
Is it Catalyst? I think it might be Catalyst. Yeah.
Yeah. There's the outdoor one that's kind of like the twin. I forget what the Unreal Tournament map used to be called, or the Unreal map used to be called, the Two Towers or Facing Towers or something like that. So there's that outdoor map, and then there's the interior. I always think it looks like a temple, like an ancient temple, and I think that might be the one that you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't like I don't like that one.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like 3 there's like 3 or 4 maps that would play. I'd have to look them up. I don't remember all that.
Oh, maybe you're talking about Turbine.
Turbine's the one. Yeah, because it's got the. Now I want to look this up, man.
I think we like Turbine, but we don't like Turbine when it is. I can't remember what the mode is where. Now I haven't played in a while. But we're Fiesta. I think we don't like Turbine with Fiesta because then people just camp with all of the. They just pick up like the 2 or 3 choice weapons, and it defeats the whole purpose of Fiesta, which is forcing you to run around and utilize weapons that kind of aren't your favorites or kind of in your bailiwick. But people just get snipes and hang out in those top upper levels.
Yep.
And grab hammer and sword and whatnot. Yeah. Which, I mean, they do all the time on Fiesta, but it just gets particularly spammy on on Turbine.
It totally does. Yeah. So Bazaar's my favorite map. That's kind of more of a COD. I feel like more of a COD map, but that's my favorite. Bazaar. Catalyst is okay. I think that was one of the newer ones in season 2 that came up, which isn't bad. Hold on a sec here. So Bazaar, what's the other ones? Oh God, I'm trying to look at this. What the hell's going on? Hold on a sec here. I pulled up an article and it's not. No. Streets is the other one. That's the one that we play quite a bit.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So Streets, Recharge is the other one. And Bazaar. So it's 3. I think there's one more I like. Actually, maybe those are the only 3 I like. Oh, and Live Fire is the other one. So there's 4 maps that I would play. So even if the maps are bad, right? Like if the maps are bad, at least give me the option to rotate those maps, like to just solely like to only play those maps. Like I feel like with Halo 2 and the other Halos, they did allow us to filter out maps that we didn't want to play.
So let me ask you this, right? Yeah. I mean, because this is what gaming social media loves to do every single day, every time the conversation comes up, right? It's a comparative discussion, and so which I don't always think is appropriate, but so the discussion is that Halo is falling short, right, of expectations and needs.
Yes.
And one thing that I brought up was, okay, so what are your go-to alternatives? A game that's in the Halo vein doesn't exist on PlayStation.
No.
So is it a matter of it's an inappropriate level of care and feeding that's being shown to the flagship franchise on a platform?
That's part of it, yes.
And so if I say that PlayStation is doing that, right? PlayStation's doing that, but arguably for titles that are smaller in scope, I guess is a question. And does that matter, or does it just matter that even if the scope is reduced, that the scope is being delivered, you could argue, with some degree of excellence?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like the Halo. So the gameplay mechanics, like we talked about earlier, they're solid. I think you would agree with that, right?
Absolutely. That's the only reason why I'm playing, why I've played multiplayer.
Yeah. So the mechanics are great. I think in terms of the level of care, which you just stated, like, is it like the level of care? And I think that's a huge part of it. And because what's happening is what's perceived as maybe not a lack of level of care has led us to where we are today with the franchise, which is this is the worst state that this franchise has ever been in. For a franchise that's consistently delivered on a great campaign, I mean, even the campaign logic, you have this open world, it just feels so empty. The way the world was designed screams that this game was intended to play with co-op, like someone else. Because it's so big, the sandbox is so big. There's so many different things to do. There's different ways you can kind of approach different combat situations. But when you're doing it by yourself, though, it just seems a little like boring. So, and I'm not trying to make this an Xbox versus PlayStation thing. After playing Halo, finishing the Halo Infinite campaign, a couple months later, Horizon Forbidden West comes out, and I load into the game and I get into the open world of that game, and the game just felt so alive. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, like this is what Halo should have felt like to me. It just felt so barren. It's like it to me it was like a waste of space. And they basically took is it Silent Cartographer? Is that the open world map in Halo Combat Evolved? I think it might be. Jeez, my memory's terrible now. Now I want to look this up. Maybe the chat can tell me.
Yeah, I don't remember if it was the exact name of the map. I know what always frustrated me with the legacy Halo games.
Yeah, Silent Cartographer. I'm sorry, Silent Cartographer is the map, open kind of the open world map in Halo Combat Evolved, and to me that game just seems like they just took Silent Cartographer and just made that a game.
Yeah, Silent Cartographer was never open world.
It wasn't like but it was
puts you in outdoor environments. Yeah,
but it was open for that game, right? Like it was outside. You weren't in this corridor, and it felt like an open world. I mean, it wasn't, but it felt like it in some ways.
Yeah. Although that's one of the aspects of game design that I don't know that I've hard pushed back. But a lot of game developers will field things where there are more open environments than like in a previous iteration, and it will. There will be this ascribement to it as open world, and I'm like, it's not necessarily. So, for instance, like one of my best examples of that is Metro Exodus, right? Sometimes there's the argument that Metro Exodus is open world. I don't know that Metro Exodus is open world in the same way that I think about, a modern Assassin's Creed game, right? But it does give you some options, and it does give you some choices, but more so. The thing that I think people are affected by is the fact that if you played, Metro 2033, it was that you were constantly right, in the metro, and you were constantly kind of in this constrained field of view, and you had the gas mask on, and it was dark, and you didn't really have a lot of peripheral vision, so your FOV was always constrained. And then all of a sudden you popped right to Metro Exodus, which put you in an outdoor environment and didn't constrain your eyesight and gave you a long range, sight line, right, et cetera. But again, I don't know that it equates to open world in the same way that I think of some of the grand designs of open world. And so, one of the things maybe that I ask or I think about is, so that Halo Infinite campaign to me is much more so a Far Cry like, and it is oriented around going around to different encampments, right? And in some cases thinking how you're going to take them down. But in many cases, those encampments, in my mind, like, don't really give you the variety of approach that at least what's in my mind is the kind of the Far Cry 5 design, right? Where every time I came up to an encampment, I felt like I had an array of like a dozen different ways to go about taking it down. And in some cases, right, with some of those encampments, some of those side missions, right, it was just, you were just going out to attack an open field where there was a particular enemy, right, that you had to take down. And so I guess in my mind, in some cases, the Halo Infinite campaign had a far reach of scope, and I guess maybe I'm agreeing with you, had a far reach of scope that, was only somewhat filled, right, in terms of, right, you put a really big shell out there, but you only populated it to so much, right, which I guess is the rampant fear running around about Starfield. But also in many cases, I still feel like the Horizon Zero Dawn, even though there might be an argument that it was open world, was still a little more constrained in the story-based vector that they still had you kind of orient around. Mm-hmm. So I just don't know that I think about those, right, in comparing them and with an expectation of them matching up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. So, I mean, I don't know, man, like I just, so and then there's this 10-year plan for Halo Infinite. I mean, I just don't have confidence, I guess, that 343 is going to deliver enough content to keep me wanting to come back on a regular basis. That's where I'm at right now with this franchise.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it'll be a struggle. I mean, my business projection on it is Microsoft is going to continue throwing money at it, right, until they figure it out.
I think so. Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily a detractor. That is the same thing that Ubisoft has done. That is the same thing Microsoft has done, right? In fact, when you think about Sea of Thieves,
it can work. Yeah. I mean, I mean, we have examples of that today.
Yeah, it can work after time, after a period of time, right? And then it's a matter of who hangs on for the ride, right? Versus the leakage, right, that may occur with the user base, over time, but from a comparing their trajectories, of Halo Infinite versus Destiny, and you can make all sorts of arguments about, Destiny and kind of the restart with Destiny 2. But I definitely feel like from a determinicity of like the roadmap that they had, there seems to be a lot more adherence to that roadmap, in the Destiny field than there is right in the Halo Infinite field.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely,
which gives validity to the comments or the concerns about. I haven't necessarily agreed with them, right, in every instance when they've been raised in the past, but give some credence to the people who have said, there were lots of examples, right, for Halo Infinite to kind of pattern themselves after. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, definitely a question about just how many resources are aligned to the Master Chief Collection versus Halo Infinite, and how much sharing there is of assets and designs. It's just kind of it kind of begs the question, right? If you're still maintaining the Master Chief Collection while Halo Infinite is still kind of struggling. And this is a problem that I've often had, right, in software development. Whenever there comes a time where you need to make a pivot, right, to a new product line, right, that is kind of a revision of the last, right? There's always this question of where are you going to put your most talented assets? And what a lot of people, right, the conventional, I guess the default thinking is, well, obviously I would put like my best assets on the new thing, right? Because that's where I need all my leadership and all my high talent kind of carving the way forward. But then you have to think about, well, my most highly talented resources are the ones that don't need a lot of direction, right? And don't need a lot of coaching. And I, if I'm the leadership of that, I go, I'm not going to spend a ton of time coaching, right? And monitoring what's going on with the legacy line. I myself need to move over, right, to the people that are carving the path forward. So maybe what I do is I leave my most talented resources right on the legacy line, and then kind of use my second tier of talented resources on the new. So questions like that are definitely things where it's tough to understand what's going on at 343. If again, like you mentioned, you're somebody who's trying to establish, what is my confidence level for this thing turning itself around?
Yeah. I'm not saying that they can't turn it around. I just don't have confidence in them doing it. I mean, I just like if you were to ask me, hold on a sec, Logic. Sorry, thought someone was calling me. Like I just don't. Look, I getting Staten back, I think was big for 343i. I just don't know. I just don't have confidence. I feel like this whole project's been mismanaged. And that goes back to when we heard about the turnover and the contractors and, contractors leaving and then coming in and trying to, piecemeal work that other contractors have done and stuff like that. Project leads leaving. I mean, it's just been like a big shit show. It seems like Staten's kind of hit the reset button. And if he's done that, and I don't know if he's expressed that, but if I was in his shoes, a big if, I would say to the community, hey, you know what? Be patient. We're going to hit the reset button here. There's some things that we need to change to make, this game the best possible experience that we can provide to our fans. But it seems like it's been more of, okay, here's the roadmap. Okay, this is coming in November. Oh, no, now that's not coming in November. Season 3's coming. I forget when season 3 was initially going to come, but now it's like season 3's delayed again.
It was originally supposed to come in November. It was supposed to be a 6-month timeline.
Yeah, November. That's right. Okay, so November 8th was supposed to be season 3 as well. Now season 3 is like been pushed back till March. It's like, why are these things being pushed back? That's what I want to know. Like, why are they being pushed back? I'd imagine that you have a bunch of I would imagine you have tons of resources. Like you said, Microsoft can throw money at this. So that's the part that I want to, like, what's happening behind the scenes? Why are these delays happening? And is this going to be something that is just going to be an issue the next year or two with this game, where they keep pushing content releases back? They have these long seasons. I mean, who wants to, I don't want to play a season for 10 months. That's not going to keep me engaged in the game. And it's fine if it does for others, but for me, like, it's not, there's just so much out there vying for my attention. My time's limited. I'm playing Fortnite right now.
Yeah, I am glad that I now have even more time to go back and finish my season 2 battle pass. So
I guess that's probably that's a silver lining. Like, for us who haven't finished our season 2 battle passes, now we have more time to do that, right? So
right. So I don't look at it the same perspective as you as wanting to know why all the delays are happening. And again, that's a I don't want to say unique perspective, but it's a different perspective than a lot of the gaming community, because again, I think of these things in terms of the way I have my conversations with my own customers, right? And it's a very delicate dance when making a decision of whether or not to have a discussion about why there's been a delay, because as soon as you convey why there's been a delay, then sometimes you have to worry about, well, the follow-on question is, right, is that a justified reason? So a lot of times for myself personally, I'm trying to figure out, because in general, my philosophical stance is I'm fine conveying to a customer why there's been a delay. I'm not going to get into, right, all the blood and guts and sausage of whether or not that's a justifiable reason. So to me, the thing that is bothersome, right, in this is that I've talked very many times, and while I'm trying to true this up with kind of my perspective on Sony, let me also loop back to the stock mention that I made. Sony stock is also down by 5.5% this week. So I'm not looking at the chat, but I'm sure people erupted that I was just pointing out that that Microsoft stock was down. Sony stock is also down. They have both had a week of probably not the best PR, and their stock prices have suffered accordingly. But one of the things that's going on to me with Halo Infinite and 343i is the way in which the messaging is being conveyed seems like it's very much getting into the same area that I often criticize Sony about, which is that to me, you have to be careful about putting out pieces of a story, right? And you have to be careful about putting out half messages for which there's to me, a clear and obvious other side of the coin, and then not be willing to talk about those. So things that have gone on this week that to me appeared very kind of cavalier and as if there was a lack of caring was the statement that, roadmap goals and objectives are table stakes. They may move. Now, being somebody who works in software development, absolutely. I absolutely get that, right? And this is why I often, talk about the gaming community kind of flipping out about release dates. And I'm like, release dates are not a promise, right? They are an advertised, right, speculation about when a game's going to be ready. But a game releases, right, when I say it releases, not right, not based on, game companies aren't handcuffed, right, to those release dates. Obviously, there are a projection and a prediction, and those things I expect to move, right, from time to time. But the way the statement was made this week, it was just very cavalier and very kind of as if, like I said, as if there wasn't any kind of care or empathy, right, that people would be bothered by moving the dates, particularly when the dates that are being moved are things that are very much in the extreme.
Yeah, Logic, real quick, man. So that's kind of so that's why I'm asking the why, like, because of how, what their approach was to releasing this. Like, if they would have said, okay, guys, here's why, to me that would have been like, okay, now I have a better understanding. You guys are, you guys have hit the restart button. That's fair. Let's give it some time. I'd probably be less cynical about whether or not this game's going to actually find its legs.
Yeah. When you go back to your comments about Staten, right? That's the thing that I feel like is the other half of the message that needs to be conveyed, right? If there has been, and it's, again, to me, looking at it from a software development perspective, right? I related like one of the personal experiences that I had been through where I walked onto a team, software had been underway for quite a long time, but I knew back in its history, it had passed hands, right, between a couple different development teams. We're getting ready to deploy, right, into production, and I start testing, and the thing starts crashing, right? And I go, wait, stop. Pump the brakes, let me run some tests and analysis, found out we had memory leaks, started digging in through static analysis what the root cause of those memory leaks were and how bad it was, and started doing MTTF and MTBF calculations, and was like, look, this thing can deploy, but it's going to need to be rebooted like every 36 point something hours, right? And I went back to the customer and started a very strident campaign about this thing needs to be rewritten. You guys have tried to overhaul this for the last several years. It's now hitting the point where so many hands have been in it doing bad things, writing, good code on top of bad code, that it's just in a state where it's constantly going to topple over. Is that what you want? Because that's not what I would want. And so, right, I had to do a global reset and kind of wipe the table. I actually completely restructured the team. There were people from the legacy team who stayed on. There were people who on the legacy team who went away, right? There were people on the legacy team who went away because they chose not to acknowledge the choice that they were being given, right? But that was an instance where I had to just completely wipe the table. And if Staten is doing that, like you're saying, right, that is the thing that I feel like needs to be conveyed, because it would, it's not going to put a fire blanket on all of the concern, but for some of your customer base, right, it is going to either allay some concerns or set some expectations. But I also get that that's very challenging, right? Like, how many times are you going to go back and say, we got to do a do-over? So, definitely some extreme choices that need to be made. But, I feel like what's going on right now is that the messaging is very cavalier and very unempathetic. And like you said, there's a feeling that there's something bigger going on behind the curtain. And some of that, I think, needs to be revealed to kind of address customer concerns.
Yeah, Slobo thinks they're clearing house. Again, I've heard from some good sources that State does want to bring more of his quote unquote his people in. So there could be that. Like Slomo, we were discussing this in the BRAP DM. Slomo's like, Slomo thinks they're clearing house. He's like, look, we're seeing these resignations made public. There's been like 5 the last 2 days. He's like, he thinks there's, that old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. He thinks that's happening. That Staten's kind of getting rid of people and bringing in people that he thinks will help him execute whatever vision he has for Halo Infinite. So,
right.
Yeah.
And
so,
then, and that's the cut. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, the other thing too is, we talk about live service. Like, there was the premise of this game was live service. We're going to, give you more Halo content. And that's kind of been the frustrating part for me. It's like, I finished a campaign. There's no campaign stuff. Like they had that cutscene for season 2. And I was like, okay, thanks for the cutscene. But there hasn't been any updates to, any additional campaign stuff, like single player campaign stuff. And that's kind of what I was hoping for when they initially announced this game, was like, okay, we're going to get content. It's going to be like something similar to like what we see with Destiny. And it's just, and I understand there's been trouble and they've had to reboot the game. But it just doesn't look good. For me, it doesn't.
And the thing that's problematic for me is I had a very lengthy discussion with HD Gamer 84, who occasionally drops by the chat. Back when I was on Twitter, about the way that I would go about writing the ship, and it's not so much of import, right? The solution that I talked about, but it's a lot of the questions that it raised, which is, when Slomo says they're clearing house, like to me, clearing up a personnel problem is, it's challenging, but
wait, but then you had that Juneteenth thing too, like the racism thing, like
right.
I mean, it's just like to me, that's like, where's the management here?
Yeah,
like, how are these things slipping through the crack? Like something like that. Like how does that slip through the crack?
Right, but to me, those are all solvable problems, right?
Oh,
there's no rocket science about that. Nobody needs to go off to college to figure out how to do that, right?
No.
But what's a bigger concern, what would be a bigger concern to me is, is there an inherent underlying architectural problem with the technology, right? We've heard Deli kind of mention that. We've heard other developers mention that, right? And that to me is the concern, because that
with the engine,
that's not solvable by a personnel swap out, right?
No, that's
a bit of software archaeology that you got to go back and you got to determine if you're going to rewrite some things and start swapping components out, and that can get very difficult with a live service game because it's deployed, right? There's no turning that off, right? I mean, it's out there now. There are ways to do that from a technology standpoint. There's definitely, obviously, ways to do that in the cloud. But those are major undertakings that have to happen. So and those are things that you can't. There is no leapfrogging that, right? That's a thing that just takes time. And the only way to get that time is to be probably arguably a little more open and transparent, right, with your customers if that's time you need. That goes back to, like, when you face adversities and challenges like this, at the end of the day, the thing that you have to be worried about from a conservation of energy perspective is you have to maneuver and negotiate for time with your customer, right? However you're going to message it, right? And there are a few ways to do that. You can do that by delivering low-hanging fruit as wins, right? Things that are not disruptive, things that that maybe may not take a huge level of effort, and maybe you might argue, and this is what I've speculated about before, you might argue that maybe that's a few new maps, right? But if your underlying technology doesn't allow you to do that, right, then that becomes, right, your Achilles heel. So, or you capitulate on other things like cost, right, or some other model. So yeah, it's gonna be Bor country. I'm glad to see Bor back. Like I said, I thought about renaming my dog Bor country. So always interested to see what he has to say. Super chat.
Bor country, the $2 super chat. Resistance 2, Killzone 2. We're a gen ahead of Halo. Thank you for that super chat, Bor. Resistance 2 is what a great game. Killzone 2 is actually my favorite of the Killzone games. So thank you for that super chat.
And he brings up an interesting thing that I was digging at a little bit, right? So right, we talked about conservation of energy. We talk about putting time, right, is the thing that you need to conserve. You need to figure out a way to maneuver for time, right, before people get, I guess, arguably overly pissed off, right, and just move out of the window of where they're ever going to return to the series. Your race now is with Sony and whatever they're doing and whatever they're going to deploy. Now, the new studios that Sony just acquired, that's you're not in a foot race with them, right? Because whatever they're working up, right, that ain't going to be done baking in the oven till 2023 at the earliest, 2024. So where is your real race? Your real race would only be with something that Sony has had in production quietly, that would be deployable, in a year maybe. If you can right the ship, right? And so that to me becomes the discussion, right? How quickly can Halo and Staten right the ship? Is that 2023? Is that 2024? If it starts to slip out of 2024, right, you start putting yourself in danger and risk of running up against, whatever Sony has cooking in the oven. Now, as we talked about last rant, right, that may not become an issue from a corporate level of concern, from a Microsoft Games level of concern, if you acquire Call of Duty.
Logic, you there?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, man. I was,
No, I was done. That was my.
Oh, okay. I thought you were still gonna. Okay, yeah. So I'm thinking about. It's funny you mentioned COD. I was just thinking about COD, because somebody in the I think it was actually our buddy David Faulkner said that he thinks Microsoft's going to kill COD. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Activision is going to be much in the same boat as ZeniMax Bethesda, kind of just running their own ship. So kind of going back to what I opened up about Halo. And again, the concern is that look, 343 has they've made good Halos, but they haven't made a great Halo, in my opinion. I think Bungie still holds that with the Halo franchise. This clearly, to me at least, seems like this was a huge undertaking for them. They didn't execute. And I'm not going to say that the franchise is dead. They can turn it around. I mean, I think you mentioned, you brought up Ubisoft doing it, and some other franchises have done this. I mean, well, Microsoft, did it with Sea of Thieves, but I feel like this is also a competitive space, and I don't know where Halo's going to kind of settle, or fit, or where Halo's going to land when the dust settles, because there's so much competition out there right now. And this is why I think content is so important for this game on a consistent basis, and good content, and not 10 months between seasons, because you have the Destinies out there that are dropping content on a more regular basis. You have those battle royale type games that offer kind of at least to me, offer very dynamic experiences. There's a lot of competition out there in this space. And again, I know Microsoft's going to throw money at this. They have the resources to do so. But I just wonder if it's going to be too little too late for them. But we'll see. Go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I mean, so and so not to tamp down, you know, in your comments, you know, when I talk about like you know, Ubisoft throwing money behind things and Bungie putting a lot of grunt work behind things, right, to turn things around. There's, I'm going to say this. I don't mean this to be a marginalizing statement, right? There's always competition, right? The difference with the there's two things that to me are different with the Halo situation. Number one, when those franchises had to turn things around, I don't know that there were inherent problems in their underlying technology, right? I don't know that for Halo, but I've definitely heard enough peeps about that kind of like Slow-Mo said, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire. At least in there being something that is problematic about it. That's one. But two, the other thing is the stakes, right? You know, when it was Ubisoft and some of these other companies that have turned things around, the thing that they were turning around was not a title upon which was notionally hinged the success of a platform. And that's part of the thing maybe to chew on too, is like, how much is the Xbox success dependent upon Halo as a flagship franchise? You know, the PlayStation vector is to have what, in my mind, is several franchises, right? That they can hang their hat on, and they're focused to always make those things, you know, desirable consumer products, right? You know, as you come into this generation, the question is around if there is another franchise that is as engendering to potential Xbox customers as Halo, or is that the singular flagship? Now, definitely in years past, you could have pointed to more than just Halo. You could have said Halo, maybe Gears of War, you know, the Forza, right? And the question just now as time goes on is just how much scratch, right, is there in those other franchises? You know, so it's you know, for people who don't approach gaming with an orientation around platforms, right, with an orientation around titles, right, that becomes a difficult demographic to address if they're specifically looking for, right, the success of that franchise.
Yeah, that's a great point. I want to get this last super chat before we wrap up here. Borbor Country again with the $5 super chat says, Resistance 3, Killzone 2 had better weapons, story, the environments were alive on these games. Up until now, no shooters have been able to reach. So thank you for that super chat, Borbor. Appreciate it as always.
And while I might not agree with putting those franchises up on a pedestal above Halo, I will say I'm super, you know, Sony says that they're focusing on live service games. I'm super excited to hear, if ever, right, that one of those live service games, the two of those live service games, I would love to see a return of the Killzone franchise with a little more, I would argue, a little more love and care, right, than those franchises received in the past. I would love to see a return of Resistance, even if it wasn't necessarily Insomniac doing it, right? I would love to see a return of that IP. You know, either one of those as either single player games, but more so as single player games that then flowered out into a live service game with heavy multiplayer components.
Yeah. No, I'd definitely like to see a Resistance game come back, and SOCOM would be welcomed as well. But I don't think we're gonna get SOCOM. I could be wrong, but I don't think we're gonna get it. But well, look, I said when we started the rant, it was going to be about an hour or so, maybe a little bit more. But yeah, no, I do need to wrap up the show though, because I got to get the kids to bed. So look, I want to thank everyone in the live chat for hanging out with us this evening. This was kind of an impromptu BRAP rant. Just kind of wanted to talk about Halo a little bit, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section below. If you think 343i can turn this around. Or if you think Halo is just doomed. But
yeah, and to get our look, we look at the comments after every episode. You don't have to insult us to get attention paid to your comment.
Yes, you don't.
And an insult without actually mentioning what in the conversation you disagreed with doesn't do anyone any good. You know, so I mean, if you feel like you need to drop just an insult as a standalone by itself, go ahead, so it can be ignored. But if you actually have some critique or feedback or a disagreement with an idea, would love to discuss it with you. Just not going to spend any more time looking at the things that start off with an insult.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. But yeah, All right, no, everyone, have a great rest of the weekend, by the way. Enjoy, for those of you in the U.S., have a great 3-day weekend. It's Labor Day weekend here in the U.S., so, yeah, just, hey, enjoy the time playing video games. Bonnie Ross has to go. Slow-Mo is shocked that she still works at 343i. He talks about that a lot. He's like, how's Bonnie still there? I don't know why she's still there. But anyhow, look, everyone, thank you so much for hanging out with us tonight. Please hit that like button and hit the bell notification so you're alerted when we go live. And if you're new to the show, subscribe. We do a lot of great BRAP rants. Very insightful stuff. You might learn a thing or two, maybe. Or not. Anyhow, thank you, everyone. And Logic Man, thank you as always, man. Always great, talking video games with you, man. So, but yeah, we'll be back. No more BRAP rants unless something crazy happens. No more BRAP rants for the rest of the week, but we'll be back next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our regularly scheduled BRAP. So until then, we're out.